We're in the offices of American Vanadium in Vancouver with President and CEO Bill Radvac. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Tara.
So before we get into Vanadium, your most recent news releases were about project updates and financing. What can you tell us about that?
All right, we just closed our financing led by Dundee. Finance itself was well oversubscribed in the first couple of days. It was primarily institutional, so that was important for us to get, build our new base of shareholders. We're going to use that money to push forward. We expect our bankable feasibility study to be delivered by the end of May, a new 43-101 with increased resource by the end of June, and that still puts us on target for production by the end of 2012.
That seems like quite an aggressive start to production.
What's important to understand is our situation. The project itself is located right in the middle of Nevada, so it's mining central, so we have all the best professionals around to help push this forward aggressively. On top of that, the operation itself has been referred to as Fisher-Price mining. It's a very simple truck shovel operation with a very low strip ratio. So essentially we're removing a ridge of ore and putting on top of a leach pad a mile away and applying sulfuric acid. So that keeps us a very low operating cost, very low capital cost. And so we can actually move on an aggressive timeline through the rest of the engineering, the feasibility study, through the environmental process into that pretty aggressive timeline of 2012. But we've had that timeline for over a year now, and we're sticking to it. We don't really see anything out there that's going to prevent us from meeting that timeline.
And what are your plans for the most recent financing?
A big portion of it obviously is to complete the feasibility study, then work on the detailed engineering here for production. But our cash needs are pretty low this year, so we're going to be using a good portion of it for exploration. And with that money this year, we have pretty optimistic, strong hopes of doubling our resource this calendar year.
Okay, so here's the big question. What is vanadium, and why do you call it the critical element?
Well, there's three real key components of why it's critical. First, vanadium is extremely important in the use of good steel. High-strength, low-alloy steel uses a very small part of vanadium, like 0.5% vanadium content will double the strength of the steel. And what's unique about that, allow you to use a third less of the steel. So it's actually a green metal. So you're talking about using a third less iron ore to produce the steel, reducing all the energy consumption needed, a third less of steel mills. And another real important component is the world average is about that 0.05% vanadium content in the steel. United States is about 0.09. China itself is 0.03. And they're making a big part of the new 5-year plan to move it up to that world average 0.05, which has a huge impact on vanadium. But that's why they're targeting. They think it has a huge green impact on their industry. The second component is the grid level storage. And even President Obama mentioning vanadium redox fuel cells being the coolest thing he's ever said recently emphasized really the world coming to the conclusion that all these solar power and wind power all sounds good, but they're very inefficient and they need mass storage. And the only really good long-term cost-effective solution is vanadium mass storage batteries. And what the third part of that critical nature is there is no vanadium primary production in the United States. Right now 5% of the United States supply of vanadium is from domestic sources, and that's actually uranium mine, so the vanadium's a byproduct. So we're actually the only upcoming vanadium supply in the U.S., and that's actually having great strong repercussions with government sources in the U.S.
So Bill, you touched briefly on the American supply of vanadium. Where does the rest of the world's vanadium supply come from?
Right, essentially all the vanadium coming out of the ground comes from China, South Africa, and Russia. There are some other supplies, for instance, as a byproduct of oil refineries out of Venezuela, a little bit coming out of the Canadian oil sands. But essentially you've got the market cornered by those three nations, which really aren't considered strategic suppliers to the United States. So that puts us again back in a really strong domestic strategic position.
So you mentioned President Obama, and in your update that he acknowledged vanadium flow batteries and that you were planning strategic relationships in the U.S. with key U.S. agencies. What can you tell us about that?
We can't get into a lot of detail, but it goes back to, if President Obama mentions vanadium redox, that's because it's now becoming a core part of their renewable energy strategy. And now they've come to the realization they can produce it, but to actually get the vanadium source itself, we are the only near-term, long-term potential supply of that electrolyte for those batteries in the United States. And so now a number of agencies have been coming to us, so we're in discussions with those to see how we can turn into a sort of critical supplier for the United States, both for the steel and the vanadium redox battery industries.
And finally, Bill, you mentioned that the feasibility study is coming out in May. How do you see that shaping up?
I can't get into a lot of details about the specifics feasibility study, but given what we see, we're confident we're going to meet or beat the numbers of the scoping study that was delivered by AMEC in 2008. And in that pre-economic assessment, they gave us a 40% after-tax IRR, internal rate of return, which is extraordinary numbers for a mining industry. That was using a $6 sale price for vanadium pentoxide, where current price is $7.50. What's unique in that scoping study was that our operating cost is $3 a pound. So we have tremendous room to grow here. Another important one is the capital cost estimate was around $90 million, which we expect to reduce as well coming in this feasibility study. So it puts us in an extremely strong financial position here looking forward, just based on the steel industry. So we consider this whole vanadium redox side, where the product would sell at even a larger premium, to be really, strong gravy.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. That's all the time we have for today. Once again, I'm Tara Sweeter in the offices of American Vanadium.